members. And so all we do is to ensure that we have a friendly environment for long-term investments in Brazil. So I'm going to talk a little more about Brazil. So demystifying Brazil. Brazil is much more than the Amazon, Rio, Carnival, or coffee. We're a solid democracy. Our constitution is of 1988. We rule under the civil law. We have a presidential system, and we do have a solid legal and regulatory framework that provides the security that international companies and investors need when they operate here in Brazil. We also have a very sophisticated VC ecosystem. I can assure you it's one of the most sophisticated around the world. We have a population that is highly adaptable to new tech. São Paulo is not only the financial hub for Brazil, but all Latin America. We have a huge population. I'm not going to get into the details of that. And we're top 5 for huge companies like Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. And we have a growing number of smartphone users. So Brazil is a continental country, and this is just to highlight, that most of the population is concentrated in the south and southeast of Brazil, and it comes as no surprise that our most entrepreneurial states are from the area: São Paulo, Santa Catarina, Minas Gerais, Rio Grande do Sul, and Rio de Janeiro. For the companies joining the program, those are probably the cities where São Paulo is the city where you're going to be doing most of your business, but the other ones are also cities where you're going to be visiting and exposed to. So a little more on the innovation ecosystem. We have come a long way from 2010 to now. So this is just to highlight some of the milestones that we have accomplished. 12 years ago, we had about 600 startups, and now we have more than 22,000. We had about 2 handfuls of VCs, and now we have more than 120, and that's including local and global firms, active investors here in Brazil. We had no corporates, and now we have more than 200, including multinational and a really growing number of local corporations implementing open innovation and CVC programs. We have hundreds of innovation hubs all throughout Brazil, not only in the south and southeast. And now we have a growing list of unicorns. We now have 27. And when we look at the startups, we can see how this has changed. So these are numbers from last year. When we look at startup stage, you can see that the higher concentration of them are in the late stage, the validation and operation, which is a change from, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago, where most of our companies were in the earlier stage. We have also a growing number of companies looking to expand abroad. Brazil is a huge country, like we said, it's more than 200 million people here. So there's no natural incentive for the companies to expand abroad, but Brazilian companies have realized that they can grow beyond Brazil. So we see this changing here from 3 years ago. We didn't have any, at least 5%, and now this number is almost 20% of the Brazilian companies looking to expand abroad. And when we look at the sectors, this is to highlight the top 5. We have a lot going on in education, health tech and life sciences, fintech, agri-tech, and e-commerce. And like I said before, we have a growing number of unicorns. Out of the 49 unicorns, I think now it's 50. I think Mexico just produced 1 unicorn last week. So out of the 50 unicorns in Latin America, 27 are from Brazil. From those companies, we have a lot of fintechs here. Last year alone, Brazil was among the top 10 countries that produced more unicorns that year. Although there's some, issues related to unicorns, I think this is it's good to show how the ecosystem has matured, because we now can provide the conditions to produce unicorns. And when we look at data from LATAM, LATAM also reached very important milestones in the past 2 years. So here we see VC investments in terms of volume. We can see like a huge growth last year, and the same in the number of deals in LATAM. And Brazil plays a major role. Brazil is at the center of all of this. Nearly 60% of all VC deals in LATAM comes from Brazil. This is another graphic that highlights how the ecosystem locally has matured. We went from 5 years ago to an average investment ticket per round of 2.2 million to nearly 30. That means that we have more capital, and we do have more capital. We have VC firms. We now have global firms also invest in Brazil. Andreessen Horowitz has invested in Brazil for the first time ever. We have a growing number of corporates actually putting capital in Brazilian startups. We have traditional PE firms looking to implement tech growth strategies. So all of this combined provides a good ecosystem for any company, be it a Brazilian or international company, to operate here in Brazil. When we look at data from our industry in terms of sectors, this is just to highlight, how investors are looking at this. So last year, fintech was at the top of the chart. It has been true for at least the past 3 years. Fintech has grown a lot, and we're going to talk a little more about that. We also have a lot of investments going into retail tech, health, software, and the other ones that you can see here. So going a little more on fintech, like I said, it was the top sector invested from VC last year. It has been growing a lot. The animated GIF that you see there just highlights how we went from 2015 to not even 100 startups, now to at least 1,300. And we have several areas of application, payment, credit, back office. And this is just to highlight the dynamics of fintech here in Brazil. Health tech is another top sector. As we saw, it's at number 2 in terms of number of startups, also a growing number of companies. It has been expanded greatly because of the pandemic as well. And here are some of the top 5 areas of application. We have had a health company in the last batch in ScaleUp. Here are some of the names of the companies to keep an eye on. And as you can see, the average investment ticket also grew a lot from 2 years ago, from 1.6 million to 8.3 million last year. And finally, agri-tech, we're going to have a good conversation with Gary from Aleph Farms in the agri-food tech space. So this is one of the sectors of excellence in Brazil. We have advanced a lot in terms of technology, and we also have a growing number of companies very active in different areas of application. I'll just highlight here that one of the areas that is growing a lot is fintech for agri-tech business. So this is something that has been growing. And we also share here some of the companies to keep an eye on. So you can have that. If anyone wants more information, we're gladly can send that over to you. So I think that's it. I'm going to pass the word now to Sergio to continue and talk a little more about ScaleUp. And at the end of it, if you have any questions, please send via the chat function or just raise your hand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. First of all, I would like to say that I'm glad to see that we have in our audience companies from Japan, from Singapore, and from Israel joining us today. So you are very welcome. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Sergio Rossi. I work for Apex Brazil. And from the Apex side, I'm the responsible for ScaleUp in Brazil. So my main goal is really to support you through your journey into the Brazilian market. And please always count on us on everything you need while you are in this process of ScaleUp in Brazil. I'm going to share just a few words about the program. I'm going to share my screen. Just let me know when you can see it.
Yes.
Perfect. There you go. So again, thank you all for joining. I'm gonna just share a few words about the program itself, how you should apply. But I know that everyone is willing to hear from Gary from Aleph Farms and their experience, not only in the program, but how to do business in Brazil. So ScaleUp in Brazil is a program, it's a soft landing program, which was designed by Apex Brazil in partnership with ABV Cap and also with the team of Sahel Trade and Investment. The program was founded in 2019, in which we had our first pilot edition with the Israeli market, in which we saw a huge opportunity considering that Israel is a very high-tech market, but with a small market size. So we thought about this opportunity in which we could position Brazil, considering the market size, the Brazilian population mindset for new technologies. Why not transforming Brazil in the second market for the Israeli companies? So in partnership with the Israeli Trade and Investment, we had the first edition happening with Israel in 2019, in which we were able to accelerate 5 companies from Israel. In 2020, even though we were already thinking about expanding the program, we had the pandemic. So we worked another second edition with the team of Israel, in which we doubled the program and we had 10 Israeli companies being accelerated. But now we are glad to share that companies from Japan and Singapore are now welcome to participate in the program with us. And I believe we're going to have a very productive partnership between the 3 countries working together to come to Brazil. So this was just a very brief story about the program itself. And as I mentioned, ScaleUp in Brazil is a soft landing program dedicated to support you, foreign tech company, to establish your business here. However, we understand that there are some tools that you need in order to set your operations here. First of them is clients. We know that you won't set your operation here if you don't have clients in Brazil. You must have access to local capital, to local partners, to local distributors. So the whole program was designed in order to fill all these gaps to keep building this bridge to facilitate your entrance in Brazil. So for those companies joining ScaleUp program, what do we offer? But before I start saying what we offer itself in the program, I would like to say 2 things. The first of them is that the program is completely free of charge. So you, for a company, you don't have to pay anything to join it. However, you must pay your expenses to come to Brazil, your airplane tickets, your hotel, about this logistics. And the second thing is this program is really meant for your company to establish your business here. If you are looking into the Brazilian market only with a thought about exporting to Brazil, I'm sorry to say, but this program is not for you. We are really willing to have companies interested in the Brazilian market, even though you are not sure. Our main goal is to change your mindset and transform Brazil into your priority market to come. So that's our main goal. So as I mentioned, we understand that you're not gonna be able to set your operations here if you don't have access to clients. So in order to fill this gap, we hire a consultancy in the program, and this consultancy will provide a whole business agenda, individualized, personalized for each company joining the program. So you're gonna have access through this consultancy to potential clients and potential partners, and even potential corporations in which you might be able to do some POCs to get access to the market. However, we have another consultancy that we hire, which is the business strategy one. Each company will receive a personalized business plan dedicated to the Brazilian market. However, it's really important to mention that the type of information that we ask to this consultancy is really deep information, even in where you should open your company in Brazil, which city, considering taxes, considering local clients, considering the main hubs around. So it's really a deep plan that you're gonna receive. Considering this partnership with ABV Cap, you will also have access to the local fund managers in Brazil, in which if you are successful, you're going to have access to local capital to support your establishment here in the Brazilian market. And of course, that during the whole program, we host several workshops with all the areas you need to know on how to establish your operation in Brazil. So we provide companies networking with person with knowledge such as on how you should open your company in Brazil, how you should adapt your company in Brazil, how to hire people in Brazil, and many others in which you're going to have access during the program. But it's important to mention that some activities, it's for the whole group, but we also provide individual mentorships for all the companies joining the program. So if you're having trouble, for example, in taxation, we will provide you a lawyer in which you're going to have a now 1 hour session so you can share your doubts, and then you can clear some things in order so you can proceed your expansion to Brazil. And of course, that we keep supporting you even later than the program. Our main goal is that you really have success in Brazil and feel supported by the whole team of the ScaleUp program. So the program is divided in 5 stages, in which in the first stage, we select a higher number of companies. At this 3rd edition, for this first stage, we're going to have up to 35 selected companies. I'll share about the selection process later on, but then we have another selection process for the 2nd stage, in which only 20 companies will keep moving on with us. So in the first immersion, which is stage 2, the companies will come to Brazil. You're going to stay mainly in São Paulo, which is the main innovation hub in Brazil. And we have this partnership with Cubo, which is the main innovation hub in the country. And during these 2 weeks in which you are staying here, you're going to have access to clients, to investors. We're going to provide demo days and networking sessions. Then you come back to your home country, to the pivoting stage, in which you're going to have some time to follow up with the companies that you had access in Brazil. You're going to have some time to adjust your solution, your product to Brazil, because you're coming back to the country in the stage 4 for the 2nd immersion. However, as you may know, Brazil is a continental country. So we try to expose you not only to São Paulo, but we'll take you to another innovation hub, such as places in the south of the country, even in the northeast, and even in the middle area of Brazil. And of course, as I mentioned, we keep supporting you even when the program is over. However, during all these 5 stages, you're going to have workshops, you're going to have the individual mentorships, that both consultancies will be in touch with you during this whole process. So it's important to say that you're going to be busy for the whole program. Some results. So far, we were able to accelerate 15 companies, and we are very glad to share that 8 companies already established their operation in Brazil. And $10 million that they raised during the program is being completely dedicated to the Brazilian operation. I hope that in the next edition, when we open for the 4th batch of ScaleUp in Brazil, we're going to see higher numbers of all these KPIs that we are sharing with you. And I hope to have also successful Japanese and Singaporean companies in addition to the Israeli ones setting operations here. So these are the accelerated companies so far. And as I mentioned, a few of them already announced that they are gonna expand to Brazil. And the program doesn't happen without partners. So we have supporters here in Brazil, but we also, it's important to say that we have supporters in Israel, we have supporters in Singapore, and we have supporters in Japan as well. And now these supporters, they are joining us not only to provide a mentorship, but also to help us to through the selection process and everything during the program itself. Who should apply? We are mainly looking to high-tech B2B companies. This is not mandatory, but we've seen that B2B companies, they have higher chances of succeeding in Brazil. Companies with validated products and be generating revenues. Mainly Series A companies, but we can analyze case by case. Again, interest in setting operations in Brazil. We are not looking for companies that are willing to export to Brazil, but really to expand. And of course, we want the participation of a founder or a C-level executive from the company. A few words about the application. So please read the guidelines of the program, check the benefits, check the obligations, check the selection criteria. If you are not the founder or if you are not a C-level, make sure that your founders know that about the program and how important it would be to expand to Brazil. And these are just some questions in which we ask you through this process, but please don't be scared about the whole process. We know that it might be long, but we can support you through this process. And if you are not able to finish, just contact us, share if you are having trouble in some sort of question, because we can, as I mentioned, we can analyze case by case, because all we want is you to come to Brazil, to register in the program, and not only be a good form, to be a good form filler, if I might say like that. So how the selection process works. We have a committee which is represented by Apex Brazil and ABV Cap, but we also have fund managers, we have accelerators, we have corporations in Brazil, in Israel, in Japan, and Singapore. All these companies and all these supporters are supporting us, evaluating the companies that registered in the program. So yeah, many people will be evaluating your solution and your potential market fit to Brazil. As I mentioned, we have two evaluation process in which the first one, we have all these stakeholders evaluating you, in which only 35 companies will be selected for the first stage. But for the second stage and on, in which we have another selection process, only 20 companies will keep moving on with us. And how do we choose the 20 best companies that will move on to the final parts of the ScaleUp in Brazil? We have investors in which we'll be evaluating your pitch. You're gonna have some sort of demo day session, but it's gonna be private, and the judges will score your companies, will evaluate your company from 0 to 5, considering your innovation grade, considering the market fit with the Brazilian market, your team, and of course, with your company's maturity. The announcement of the 35 selected companies will be on July 7th. And then for the companies, the 20 companies that will move on with us, they will get to know on September 9. I know that I have already spoken a lot. We will share this presentation with you later on, but please, when you receive the presentation, take the chance to check this testimonial, to share your, to see what the Israeli companies are sharing about us. And of course, the registrations, it's gonna go up to June 12th. You're gonna have from now on something around 12 days. So register the program and count on us on everything you need. So thank you.
Thank you, Sergio, so much. So we got a question I just want to address before we move on to the interview with Gary. So we got a question here from Nagata-san. They're asking about main factors for the failure of non-Brazilian companies in Brazil market. They like to know the tendency of the failure by non-Brazilian companies. I can tell you this, before we launched the program, we did the first, actually the 2 editions we had so far was with Israel. Israel was our pilot market. So before we launched the program, we did some interviews with Israeli companies operating in Brazil. And from that, I can tell you, like, one of the biggest factors is not really knowing the market. As any other market around the world, it has it's your particularities, and Brazil is complex, especially when it comes to taxes. If you join the program, you're going to see we're going to have several sessions dedicated to that. So it's really important that you know how to navigate in the country. And what we noticed from interviewing those companies is that they thought they had a formula that applied to all. and it's not really the case. So some companies try to operate from their home countries without any presence here in Brazil, or they try to hire someone. There was a case where they hired someone, a manager from Argentina, and it's not the same. We're close, but we're not the same. So that company in particular, they actually canceled their operations, went back, took everything back to Israel, but then the opportunity was so great that they actually got together and then they hired a local manager and they came back to Brazil. So I would say the first factor is not knowing how to navigate, and that really affects your money and your time. So that can contribute to an international company not succeeding here in Brazil. The other factor is currency. Unfortunately, Brazil has a volatile currency, and some companies that plans to keep everything abroad and charge the price based on their global operations, they're probably gonna hurt a little bit. So the best thing is to create, to build your operation locally and charge accordingly, because then you're definitely gonna see results in the medium to the long term. So I guess with that, I'll pass the word to Nikki.
Thank you, Chris. Hello, everyone. And we would now like to invite Gary Brenner, who is the Director of Market and Corporate Development at Aleph Farms, to speak about his company's experience as a participant in the last batch of the program. Gary, thank you so much for joining us today. And as you know, the objective of the second part of the webinar is to present your perspective to other companies that might be unsure whether this market and program are a good fit for them. So with this in mind, I'm going to start off with a more general question, and we invite everyone who's here in the audience to put their own questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to them at the end. So Gary, starting, what did you know about the Brazilian market before you applied for ScaleUp, and how did this information contribute to your choice to join the program?
First of all, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to see you again. My own personal business background is in the food industry. When I started out, we used to call it food ingredients. Now we're calling it ag food tech. And basically, I actually had a lot of interactions over a period of a couple of decades with both the sourcing side of soy proteins in Brazil to export to my country, as well as on bringing soy protein, enriched soy protein products to Brazil for a few categories, both in meat and food processing, as well as nutraceuticals. So I had quite a lot of experience, visited Brazil many times, and still somehow you guys surprised me, and I learned a lot in the year plus that I participated in this program.
Excellent. And during and even after the program, what were the major difficulties you encountered in Brazil, and how do you think that ScaleUp helped you overcome these challenges and maybe even shape your global business as a whole?
Coincidentally or not, as we were, just as we came into the ScaleUp program, we were beginning to identify and even interview potential strategic partners in Brazil. And by the end of the process, we had already decided on one, and we had a term sheet for initial MOU to learn the business and the market together, with the idea of setting up operations in Brazil. So there were many aspects of the program which none of us on my side in Israel had any understanding or knowledge whatsoever. And that's primarily on the business, finance, legal, tax was mentioned, and all of these aspects of how to do business, importing, not importing, and ultimately it goes into regulatory pathways as well. the Brazilian people, how to dialogue in English at least. I don't want to say that's easy, but I found it very comfortable and very, over the years, enjoyed the experience of coming to Brazil many times. But all these other aspects of creating a new business in Brazil were not known to me prior to the ScaleUp program.
Gary, and how did these tools you received, and let's talk in particular a little bit about the mentorship and business development, how did this help you, change your perception about Brazil and also adapt to coming here?
First of all, a comment to your new candidates, and as part of my recommendation that yes, they should join, is that I come from the marketing, business development, product development side, which is to say that on the finances and legal aspects of creating a new business in Brazil or anywhere else, that hasn't been my responsibility. That's not where my core skills are. And here I would say both, I'm assuming, or maybe I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that a lot of the candidates who are on this program right now in this discussion are probably come from similar types of backgrounds, maybe technological, but not necessarily CFOs and legal counsel. And here I would recommend, what took me a while to understand, is to start to involve other people from my company in these sessions. I participated in everything, but I could not benefit from everything in the same way as our CFO or our legal counsel could. And so learning the schedule, the program sessions in advance, and preparing internally, as well as maybe preparing our questions to you, that came to me as an afterthought in many cases. So here's a recommendation both to the participants and yourselves. Having said that, it can be frightening sometimes, the legal and tax mechanization. Companies or startups, they must have this kind of guidance. Otherwise, there's just too many obstacles. And I think what we took away is not all of the answers to our specific needs or questions, but at least where to go to get the answers when the time is right. And we're assuming that sometime in 2024, we'll be steady. Or at the end of 2023, we'll start to put together our business internally in Brazil. And so we know where to go now in order to get the more specific answers to the very specific questions that we have.
Perfect, Gary. That was actually one of the next questions we have. I mean, we get a lot of companies that ask us, oh, our CEO obviously can't travel to Brazil for such long periods. So it's really great that you're pointing out, that many people can participate. It's, of course, we need someone to lead, someone to represent the company. And there, a biz dev position is very good because that's the person who can really pitch everything and be present. But everyone in the company is welcome to join, and the more the merrier for us. We have a question from the audience, so I'm going to jump to that.
But then in answer to that, by the way, just interrupt.
Go ahead.
For a second, is that, we've all learned how to work virtually. So if, I'm immersed in Brazil for a few weeks, but I can connect my people by different disciplines in my company and, lead that exchange. So it's just as well, not everybody can come to Brazil from a startup at the same time.
Exactly. No, and then I feel like we have to take advantage of hybrid models now that, we have them. So definitely. And we can always, adapt and overcome anything if there are more people who are interested in participating, but aren't necessarily here. So I'm going to ask you the question from the audience, and then we'll come back to ours. So the question says, Mr. Gary, thank you for your presentation. What factors made you come into the Brazilian market?
I'm coming from the perspective of the food industry and food tech. And our read of not only Brazil, but Argentina and other Latin American countries is that in order to feed 10 billion people globally, and whatever percentage of that will be the growing population of Brazil as well, we cannot continue to tear down rainforests and use conventional cattle rearing as techniques in order to feed everybody without destroying our planet. That's the central theme of what Aleph Farms is all about. And so therefore, we think that we're bringing something to Brazil as well, an alternative to the conventional, but not to replace them, but to be an extension of them. And therefore, our discussions and decision as far as partnering in Brazil was people who share that sense of values and vision of, where we're going to get our food in the future.
Yeah, and just as a follow-up from Mr. Satoshi Nagata, which is actually quite interesting, because Aleph Farms is such a disruptive technology, he asks how you made differences between your competitors in Brazil and if you did co-creations with similar companies. And I actually don't know if in Brazil we have something as...
First of all, to the best of our knowledge, you don't, but on the other hand, you have, I know of 3 leading universities where research is being done in our category of food and plant-based as well as now cultivated. And they were very encouraging to us, the professors and the academics in terms of, okay, how are we going to operate in Brazil? And I think the Brazilian academia for all categories in business is really on a high level. There's no question about that. Secondly, as a disruptive technology, the regulatory pathways are critical. And I'm assuming that's true for other disruptive technologies. Every country right now is trying to reset their whole approach to technologies when it comes to bringing innovation to the country. What are the regulations? In some cases, what is the legislation? And but not everybody understands the language that the innovators are bringing. And it's not just because of English and Japanese or English and Portuguese. It's just the language of these innovation disruptive technologies is very often something that we have to go in. And lastly, no, as far as we know, there's no competitors locally. But on the other hand, we definitely believe that co-creation, partnerships, innovation of the kind that's going to impact our planet is only going to come through these kinds of collaborations, and also in Brazil.
Yeah, definitely. And just as a message, for potential participants, Israel was chosen first, and also now Singapore and Japan are participating in this program because, we've done a lot of research and we know that these countries can provide complementary technologies that we don't necessarily have here. As Cristiane showed, our market is growing and we're having a lot of growth, but there's still a lot of gaps. And we really hope you guys can come and fill these gaps for us where Brazilian startups haven't really gotten yet. And Gary, one more question. Do you have any further advice to give those who are interested in applying but are still a little bit unsure?
Look, there's no question that this program, ScaleUp in Brazil, requires a lot of time. Startups like ourselves don't always have the span of the ability to concentrate and absorb so much information, and then they become a little bit afraid of this. But if you look upon Brazil as we did and do, the Americas in general, as a strategic market and strategic in terms of putting together a new business, and certainly of the Latin American countries, Brazil is first and foremost for all the reasons: technological capabilities, population size, potential market, proximity to the other countries. So I know Chile well. I examined Chile. I know Colombia well. I examined Colombia. I didn't examine Argentina, but it was clear it was going to be Brazil. And therefore, if you can't do everything on your own, you need a program like this. The only advice I would make to those of you, as I already gave, which is to, because it's such time consuming, feel free to ask them, Nicole and the team, Christiana in particular, because I bugged her the most, your questions, and to make sure that they're helping you be focused and to help you use that time the best way possible. And while we were not able to do the immersion part because of Corona, from everything we learned and thought about it, if it would open up for us, and the other day you have to be in the country for some period of time, and so I know that that's ahead of me, with or without ScaleUp in Brazil. So to do that kind of immersion, but this time it'll be more efficient for me, I think.
No, definitely. And we'll be waiting for you here as well with open arms. Yeah. And this is also something, I mean, we realize that, in this post-pandemic moment, it is difficult. Travel isn't, the same as it used to be, but we also think it's very important. And even with your interaction, even if virtual, with, for instance, the hubs, we got a question about which other cities other than São Paulo you will be visiting, and this is Belo Horizonte, Florianópolis, and also Rio de Janeiro, which are all places that, we feel are essential for you to go, get to know people, make connections. And even if this isn't exactly the people you want to speak with initially, this really helps. And Gary, how do you feel that talking to the hubs was? Do you think this was something that opened your eyes a little bit for other market opportunities?
The food tech hub, or what are you talking? I'm not sure I got.
Yeah,
Which
no,
hub?
both the innovation hubs. Yes, we did. That's right. We had, and this is something that's also, important. We're going to try to have, tailor-made sessions. So if you're in food tech, you'll talk to people in food tech and not someone from the automotive sector, for instance. But also the hubs in general. We had sessions with Belo Horizonte and Florianópolis, and also Rio Fábrica. Do you think this helped you open your mind a little?
Less so for us, because we had just exited from the kitchen, the food tech hub in Israel. Our focus is already, okay, we're building our pilot plant here in Israel, and we are already designing the mid-scale and large-scale facilities. And so the Florianópolis, as much as I read about it a lot, isn't relevant for us in this case. And also because we had already developed during the period of the program, the relationship with BRF. And so we already know we're going to the next stage. On the other hand, I know some of the people and spoke at some of their conferences during the course of the program. And so on panels together. So I think it's going to come into become relevant for us when we start looking for employees from the food industry and biotech industry. And so I'm sure we'll be reconnecting with them, but from that angle.
True. Yes, no, that's true. And also, this is another very important aspect. We talk a lot about the legal difficulties and taxation, but HR and labor laws in Brazil are also very particular. So, we think that the program really helps you understand the mindset here in those terms. Well, all right then, if anyone else has any questions in the Q&A, Marcos asked you when we can taste the meat here in São Paulo. Aleph Farms protein.
Probably sometime in 2023, we'll do some tasting. In our case, that means also having regulatory approval. And in our discussions with Anvisa and MAPA and Embraca, and they were in Israel 2 weeks ago, we told them we want to work on the regulatory approvals at 2 levels. First, tasting, and then actual commercial sales, because we have a process of developing the market and consumer acceptance, which is going to take time as well.
Yeah, and speaking of the regulatory front, we know this is, a very difficult subject as well. And how has it been in Brazil, and how is that different from other countries you guys are working in?
Okay, you have people here from Japan and Singapore, and I know both very well. So Singapore is the easiest. It's not easy at all. Japan, we're in dialogue and we're learning. The Brazilian, based on the discussions that we had last December with leadership of Anvisa, we believe that when we finish with the US FDA and get approval, it'll be much easier for us to make a submission based upon the American requirements, the US requirements. And so we're kind of, we at least decided, I don't know about the other technologies, but in our case, that's my answer, that it has to be a kind of a rolling process of mutual education, both in terms of their requirements, our capabilities. It's a very complicated subject, cultivated meat, covers everything from biotechnology to food processing. And so we're taking this step by step.
Definitely. And, we're super honored here in Brazil to have been a part of this and to have you guys come here. And to everyone in the audience, we'll keep you guys updated as to when Aleph Farm launches the product, and then we can all try it together. All right,
Thank
then.
you.
If
You
we
can come
don't
to
have
Israel
any...
now.
True. That's true. But we want people to come to Brazil. So,
No, to taste.
Yeah. So I'm going to pass the word back to Chris. Gary, thank you so much. Always
Thank you.
for your candid responses and, for really helping companies understand a bit more of what we're trying to do here.
My pleasure. Good luck to all of you, and see you in Sao Paulo.
Thank you, Gary, and thanks for the comments about yes. It was a pleasure to work with you, and I plan to continue so. So I'm definitely expecting you here in Brazil whenever you come.
Very good.
Thank you to all of you for joining us. Ciao. I hope this was beneficial to you, understanding how the program operates and how it can potentially apply to it. As mentioned before, we know the registration form can be extensive, but we're here to help, especially when it comes to data about the Brazilian market. We are working with JETRO from Japan, Enterprise Singapore, Israel Trade and Investment. So each of those entities can help you greatly. That's what they do. So if you have any questions about that, please just contact them and contact us as well. We hope you join, and we hope to be seeing you again in the selection process. Meanwhile, if you do have any questions, just send over an email. We're going to share the content of this webinar and the presentations. And I think that's it. Thank you so much for all the partners involved, and thank you for your participation. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.